Howdy, y'all. I'm Kurtis Sunset.
And I'm Leah Halston. And this is Weathering Rainbows.
Well, howdy, Miss Halston.
Let's go for a walk on the Rainbow Trail.
Oh no, the last time you forgot the umbrellas and got us into a whole heap of trouble.
I won't forget this time. Let's go. Oh my, those sirens. I feel stormy weather moving in.
Girl, that ain't men it's raining. That's sequins and stones.
And we ain't got no umbrella. We better run.
I'm glad we had each other to weather the rainbows. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back. It has been a while, a long month, because last month was Pride Month, and obviously we were very, very busy that month. Leah, what did you think about Pride this year?
First of all, hello everybody. I miss you guys. Feel like it's been forever. Feel like I haven't been in this room in forever, so kind of glad to be back in this room. Pride was for me, it was absolutely amazing. It was smooth. I ran the drag tent this year, and it ran so good. I was super proud of all the entertainers, and every show. I was nervous about how the show times went because the drag show started from 2 and it had to run till 8. So I was kind of nervous about that, but everything ran so smooth and every show had a packed crowd. So if you guys were there and you saw me for Pride, you know I was a hot mess. I was hot.
You were carrying around a baby at some point. That's all I knew.
Yes. Oh my God. I have to shout her out on Instagram. Hold on. I know it's something. She actually make those realistic babies. Give me just a minute. I have to pull up her name because she's supposed to be making me a baby. And I really thought it was a real baby. And it kind of threw me. Too. They had it in a stroller and everything. It was crazy.
Yeah. I thought it was too.
We might just have to put in the link, but I do want to shout her out. She was super amazing. She was super nice, and we've been talking because she wants to do me my own baby, like I was saying it at Pride, my baby.
Yeah. Well,
I was really wrecked when she grabbed the baby by the neck and like just held it up. I was like, oh no. Do you know how much trade I can get if I walk around? I need a baby daddy. Any volunteers? I need to put somebody on child support.
Yeah.
Not only that, the chugging beer. I had kids chanting me to chug beer. I drink a beer every hour during the show. So yeah, I was pretty it was a good time.
Your tent was swamped by kids. Like it was just full of just I
love kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was great. I popped in occasionally because obviously we were running our vendor booth and doing other things for Pride, and we had the parade and stuff like that. But I popped in at one point, and you were having everybody do the walk, and so that was a lot of fun to see. Just people get up there and strut their stuff. So
it's okay. So with me running it by myself, like when I did the walk, it was so many people, and the show was. I was on a time schedule, so I had to like tell somebody like stand behind that person and cut that person off. And it was so hard to turn some kids away because I was like, no, but I'm like, everybody wanted to get up and walk, and I'm like, no, we got to cut this off at some point, because I'm on a time schedule here. So
yeah. Well, I had a blast. Tovlo was amazing. I wish you could have been there for that, but it was phenomenal. She's such a good performer.
So can we clarify how to pronounce that? Because Rue pronounced it the right way. Mm-hmm. And so I'm confused. Tovlo.
Tovlo
Oh,
is like the Americanized way we all say
okay.
it. And then I believe the Swedish version is like Tuvalu or something.
Tuvalu, yeah,
Like, so,
Tuvalu. Because I
yeah.
know Megan Thee Stallion said it on her Instagram, and we thought she was saying it wrong, but it was
Right.
actually the right way.
Yeah, I will still always just say Tovlo because I'm from the country and that other stuff is too hard to say. So
I need a Swedish name.
that'd be neat. We should go to
Leo,
Sweden.
Leo, Leo,
Lihu.
Leo.
Awesome. Oh goodness. Well, we survived Pride. That's the big
Yes,
thing.
we did.
Pride can be so exhausting, just with all the different events that we had to go to. And I know we even went up to Columbus at the beginning of the month, which we'll talk about in
Yes.
future episodes. We won't get
Okay.
into that one here. And then I don't know what all you've done since then, but I had to survive my second round of COVID. So that knocked me out for about 3 weeks,
Wow.
which is why that this interview, which we would have released on July 4th, is running a little late.
Okay.
But for this episode, a lot of people are talking about, we survived Pride Month, and all of us are still kind of in that like Pride hangover stage, not necessarily drunk, but just like the exhausted stage. So a lot of people want to know what we do to help our mental health kind of recover after a very busy Pride Month. So what are like 3 things that you have done since Pride to kind of get back on track?
Well, for me, it's just a lot of rest and disconnect myself from social media. And I wish I could just disconnect myself from the club and stuff. But, right after Pride is back into work.
Right.
So it's like, Pride is already stressful. I was stressful putting the show together and, being out in the heat all day. And so when Sunday came, I was like, I'm turning off my phone. So my detox from Pride was like just chilling on the couch, watching TV. I didn't want to see nobody. I didn't want to talk to nobody. I didn't want no trade. I didn't want nothing. But I had to work, because my daytime job. So it's not like I got a break,
Right.
So it was like everything just kept going. I just took myself away from. I didn't have the stress of putting the show together anymore. Now I'm dealing with the pay situation. These girls. When am I going to get paid? Listen, I've done my part. Do not bother me. No more. Do not bother me no more. I'm done with Pride until next year. Well, until September for Louisville Pride.
Right. That's coming on September 17th, I believe, this year.
Yeah. But for me, it's just like detoxing and getting some me time and taking care of myself, and less like watching TV, resting, eating,
Yeah. I think for me, like, this Pride was really different because we just had Pride in October of last year. So like you didn't get a full year to like recover and, do things. And so it felt like it was almost like back to back. So I was really, really exhausted at the end of this one. For me, like I've like studied all these kind of different ways to like make yourself refreshed and stuff. And so like one of the main things, I will organize everything like in like my physical environment. So like the first thing I do is clean house.
Yeah.
And we had like 2 cars full of just stuff that we took to Pride.
Yeah.
So transporting all of that and then like organizing all of that was just chaos. So that was step 1 for me. Second, like one of the things I do is so much of my job is like in front of a computer screen.
Yeah.
So like manual labor is actually a way that like refreshes me. So like I tried to spend a lot of time like outdoors in the garden or like, doing landscaping, stuff like that to just like refresh. And then finally, like I always like to do, especially after Pride Month, because it's utter chaos. Like there's things everywhere in my room and all this kind of stuff. And like, I just finally am just like, I'm going to let it go until after Pride and then I will deal with things.
Yeah.
So I always do a like mental health and physical health, like just reboot. Which That's something I think you'll enjoy, because I am going to, for the next like 30 days, record some things from my reboot that I am doing.
Okay.
And I think people are going to get to see the side of me that I don't often reveal. So,
Okay.
but we are. I have started a diet. I've started working out again.
Oh, good
I
for
reached
you.
a point where I was like at the heaviest that I had been. So I was like, I got to do something. Like I had this dream where Shawn Mendes like friend zoned me. And I was like, if I'm being friend zoned in my dreams, then like it's time to change. So,
Yeah.
but so those are the kind of things that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be releasing a lot of TikToks, I think.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad to hear that. I guess I can tell you that I am on week 3 of no drinking.
all right.
So yeah, I think I'm trying to go till September 1st without drinking. I mean, it's not because somebody was like, I think Saturday night I mentioned this to somebody and they said, "Are you going to AA classes?" I was like, "Hold up, hold up, no. She's not alcoholic, boo. It is my choice because being in a nightlife, we are pressured to drink."
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I want to do for me and just in my mental health and my body. And for the past 3 weeks, I've been feeling great. You guys know, play lets out at about 3 a.m. I work all day Friday, then work all night. And then Saturday, most of the time I just sleep until it's time for me to go to play. And I just got tired of it, drinking and then sleeping all day. And now 3 weeks of no drinking, I'm like getting up Saturday morning and I'm running errands and I'm up doing things and feeling good, and not feeling all groggy and stuff. So, but I'm proud of myself. I'm gonna try to make it till September 1st, and not try. I will make it till September 1st, and if I can go a little bit longer, I will. I think September 1st. When September 1st get here, I may just do like a beer or a glass of wine, But most of this was just for to not drink like heavy alcohol.
Yeah.
Like the fireballs that you guys bring to me on stage and the tequila shots and stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of
that'll be a great like reboot for you too, because like that is something like you get caught up in and it just like becomes like so routine that you've got to drink all the time. And
but everybody think you have to be intoxicated to do the show, or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the best time. I feel like I'm more funnier and I'm more entertaining sober,
Yeah.
What I do know is drunk people around me, intoxicated people around me when I'm sober, I'm like, ooh, is that what I look like, or that's what I sound like? Okay, but I'm excited.
You can tolerate drunk people a little more when you're drunk, but like when you're not drunk, it's hard. So I get that.
I just got to be careful because now I'm eating. Like I'm always hungry now. Like I'm like fudge. I am going to be eating everything. Like now, like say I'm eating pineapples, y'all. Yes, I'm eating.
Yeah.
So I got to be careful that I'm not. I don't want to eat and gain weight. So
you can do this like healthy like shake stuff like me. Give them some ASMR type.
First of all, I love shakes, but they don't disagree with my body. I can't do them, honey.
Yeah.
I love a good shake, but I can't do it. I think I'm eating. I'm also changing my eating habits too. I've been doing like chicken and rice at work, and then a salad when I get home. But Saturday night I was craving burgers. It's burger week. So I bought a pack of meat with the 4 patties already made. I ate one Saturday. I'm gonna eat one tonight. I'm eating a burger a day. Forget y'all.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I bought some steak. Red meat is my guilty pleasure, so I'm trying to stay away from that. But I'm gonna eat it like once a month. So, but like sweets are my thing because I got like 2 packs of Oreos. And I don't know if you guys seen like Kroger's has popcorn now, and it's like Snickers and Twix and M&M.
Yes. Oh my goodness, the Butterfingers are so good.
Oh my! Okay. So that's your guilty pleasure. I got the Snickers. They said that's the best one, so I'm excited for those.
Well, I can't do that for the next 30 days. So
I know. Calories.
Oh,
Yes.
goodness. Well, it's good to be back. We're going to keep this intro short because I do want to give a lot of time to Lieutenant Colonel Bree Fram, who is the Lieutenant Colonel of the U.S. Space Force, which is just really an awesome thing. Like,
Yeah.
What do you even like do in the U.S. Space Force? What would you do, Leah, if you had complete control over space? Like, what would you do?
I mean, y'all already know I'm infatuated with alien life, and I love that. So, I'll be trying to get to the moon. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, they released that really cool picture the other day from.
I know.
So that was like, we're not alone. Like, there's something out there.
Well,
I guess that's probably where like both of our soulmates are, like on another galaxy.
Listen, I already know. I hope mine's is like purple and green with antennas or something. But no, I don't know what I would do. Like, I'm so infatuated with all that stuff, like NASA and space and moons and aliens and stuff. So I couldn't even imagine myself in that situation.
I went to space camp in like 4th grade, and I'm terrified now to like ride rides because I rode that like Liberty space shot or whatever that like shoots you up in the air and then drops you or whatever. But I did not get my seatbelt fully. Like, I was only buckled on one side. So I was just terrified. Like, I won't ever get on the rides like that again. So can't do it.
I don't like anything that shoots up, shoots down, or spin around. I can't do it. I wonder, if I get sick on a cruise boat, I probably would get sick on the space shuttle. Like, motion sickness is crazy.
Yep, you can just see Leah's puke just floating around like
baby,
gravity.
That's another story. Port of Arthur. I've never projected vomit like I projected in Port of Arthur on that ship. It was gross. All I could hear was coming out the bathroom. I rushed out the bathroom before anybody could see me. When I say I painted the walls, I painted the walls. And I left out the bathroom real quick. And when the person that went in after me, all I could hear as I'm going back upstairs to the party, somebody was like, "Ooh, somebody let this bathroom have it."
Oh my goodness.
I'm gonna tell you
that bad.
It was crazy because I knew I had to vomit, and soon as I got to the bathroom, soon as I pushed the door open, it just like projected out on all of the walls. Like, I didn't even make it into the door. It was crazy. I was sick that whole trip.
Your soulmate on the other galaxies listening to this, and they're like, "No, I'm done.
Leave her on Earth.
Leave her on Earth."
Leave her
all right.
Earth.
On that note, let's get into the interview with Lieutenant Colonel Bree Fram. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to Weathering Rainbows podcast, where we get to interview some cool people doing some amazing things for the LGBTQ plus community out there. Today, we are truly honored. We are recording this on the kickoff of Pride Month. It is June 1st. And today, we have with us Lieutenant Colonel Bree Fram. She is the president of SPARTA, which is an organization that advocates and educates about transgender military service, and is also dedicated to the support and professional development of over 1,400 transgender service members. She's also an astronautical engineer and serves in the U.S. Space Force. And we're truly honored that you're here with us today. You have such an amazing story, and that is what we want to bring out to everyone here out in these rural parts. So, Bree, can you tell us a little bit more about your service?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you. I've served in the military for almost 19 years now. I had some amazing stories of service in my family from both my grandfathers in World War II, but the military had never been in my plans as I grew up and became this huge nerd thanks to Star Trek and wanted to be Geordie LaForge, wanted to make the warp engines go, which put me in a career in aerospace. But it wasn't until after I graduated from college that the attacks of September 11th occurred. just a few months after my graduation. And that absolutely changed my career path. I tell the story of a few days after that, I was driving to see my girlfriend, who is now my wife. It's about a 2-hour drive. Thankfully, I could do it on autopilot because I saw one of those American flags that had just appeared everywhere after the attacks, and I broke down in tears. And I cried for an hour straight, and when I walked into her apartment, I said, I'm going to join the Air Force. And that kind of set me on this career path, which has been incredible for me, and allowed me more recently to transfer over to the Space Force and serve in a new military service where we have the opportunity to set what's truly a 21st century military culture. So many opportunities out there, yet all set against the background of I'm trans, and that wasn't okay for the vast majority of my time in service.
Yeah. One of the things I actually really enjoyed that you said, you were actually consider yourself the first person to be offered a job in the military for being transgender. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that goes back to 2016 when policy first changed in the Department of Defense. And the Secretary of Defense came to the podium. He had this great announcement and allowing trans people to serve, which was wonderful. And I had thought about being in that room, but I thought better of it, stayed at my desk in the Pentagon. And when he was done speaking, I came out in a letter to colleagues and a note on Facebook to everyone. And we can dive into that experience, which was crazy in itself. But within just a few days after that of coming out, I got a request from the new general that had just come in to lead our organization to say, tell me about this policy, because you just came out, you probably know all about it. So it was the most time I had ever spent speaking to a general in the military, probably talked for an hour and a half just about me, about the policy, what it meant. And he had great way to relate it back to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the fact that he used to be flying F-16s with others, and they knew everyone who was gay, but it didn't matter because as long as those people had each other's back and they were there to support the mission, that's all anyone cared about. And a few days later, even before he had met all the people in the organization, he sent me a note and said, I'd like you to be my executive officer, which is
amazing.
Great developmental position. Because you work directly for this person, you get to see things from a much higher perspective than you would otherwise. And I had a great year working for him.
We generally like to start out with the story of a person's background. So where did you grow up? And how was family life like for you growing up?
So I grew up in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities area, in a suburb there. And family life for me was pretty normal. And it was, a dynamic where I had a younger sister, a younger brother. I was one that kind of kept to myself within the family quite a bit, but had great relationships with friends, had just kind of this normal childhood where get out and go to my friend's house, play capture the flag, running through everyone's yards in the neighborhood. I had a great time just inviting people over, playing Nintendo or computer, and it was just a great childhood for me that I have almost nothing but fond memories of.
That's great. At what age did you learn about yourself and that you were transgender?
So that's a really hard question to ask to answer. I knew something was different about myself. In fact, for Halloween, when I was 3 and 4 years old, I was Wonder Woman right alongside my sister. So something was different, but I didn't have the words to express it or, the knowledge that this was okay to be who I was. Because we are talking 30 plus more years ago. And, you had to go to the library to learn what trans was. And there weren't very many books at any given library. Luckily, I came of age as the internet started to be a thing in the mid-90s, and I was able to do a little research. But it still didn't register as identity for me. In fact, it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I started to think that this wasn't something that I liked to do, but instead it was who I am. So it took a lot of time, a lot of looking up to others and understanding more about myself, even though something was different from an early age.
One thing, I will preface this by saying that a lot of times whenever I'm asking questions in this interview, I'm approaching it from the rural viewpoint of people that would have no clue about LGBTQ culture. So a lot of times I may ask questions that I don't want them to come across insensitive. I know that you're very good with diversity training, and so I may ask questions that are, for instance, about gender dysphoria and things like that I'm hoping that you can kind of help guide our listeners to understand those better. So with that, I know that you said you were around in your 30s before learning about your identity. And the military, they call that, I guess, gender dysphoria. But they also, I noticed in your book that you mentioned that they kind of labeled gender dysphoria in the military as, I believe, let me see, it was a clinically significant distress. And obviously you didn't like that. And that was one of the reasons why you didn't want to identify as gender dysphoric person. Can you go into that and explain what that means to our listeners?
Absolutely. And I love questions that may seem insensitive, may seem off, because that's always a chance to educate. It's a chance to change perceptions. But interestingly, gender dysphoria, that diagnosis that we talked about, that's not a military specific thing. That was the clinical definition of gender dysphoria according to psychologists. So to get the diagnosis of gender dysphoria, it said, you must have both a desire to be the opposite sex, which can be expressed in 6 different ways on the category, and what you mentioned, this clinically significant distress because of it. And what a wide open term for interpretation. Right. What does that mean? And I felt like that was something where you're being told, you're broken, something is wrong. And nothing could be further from the truth. What it really is, it's an opportunity to be your best self, to reach your full potential. And all that's happened is your internal sense of self is different than the label the doctor slapped on you when you were born just by looking at external parts. And we've seen so many different variations of human biology expressed chromosomally in terms of, sex characteristics that saying what a doctor sees in 6 seconds looking at you and puts on the birth certificate is immutable and perfect and everything is right, it couldn't be further from the truth. And many people just don't have that match between their parts and what's in their hearts.
Right. I did see the really cool announcement that there are states that are actually starting to allow for the X as their gender on the actual driver's license, which I think is a big improvement. I know colleges started doing that about 5 or so years ago, and now they're actually doing it with state licenses. Can you explain? I kind of want to discuss transgender first, because a lot of our listeners out in rural areas, they just really don't encounter a lot of transgender people as often as the bigger cities and that sort of thing. Can you explain, SPARTA put out an amazing, frequently asked questions, and I'm going to post a link to that for all of our listeners to go and review a lot of these type of questions. But can you kind of talk about what it means to be transgender? And I also want to ask the question, a lot of people in rural areas think that in order to be transgender, you have to have fully transitioned and gone through a medical process. And I love what you state in your book about that. Can you go into that?
Yeah, so I think being trans has nothing to do with medical changes. It's who you are. And regardless of whether you have surgeries or take any medical intervention in any other way, such as hormone replacement therapy, that's still who you are. And all that is saying is that a transgender person, again, has that mismatch between who they are on the inside, who they've always been, and what was labeled on them by a doctor or society as to what their expectations of that person are in terms of gender identity. And a way I like to describe it is that some people realize they're trans and can express it even before they have the words to speak. You know, you can ask a 3 or a 4-year-old, some trans kids, and they'll know. I mean, they will make it very clear to their parents that, you know, this is who I am. Others, like myself, may take until later in life to fully understand it and process it, mostly because of the expectations that society puts on us and the stereotypes that may be out there about what a transgender person is. You know, for so long in our media, we had this expectation that transgender people are tricksters or villains in some way. And if that's all you see when you're growing up, it's really hard to say, that could be me. So now that we're getting such positive and amazing media representation out there, you can see people earlier and earlier saying, it's okay to be myself and it's okay to come out. And that's why representation matters so much. And sharing the stories of successful transgender people really makes a difference all across the United States.
Absolutely. Another false belief I would say that a lot of people in rural areas have is about transgender, what that means for, I guess, sexuality. Because they presume that if you're transgender that you would be gay or that you would only like a certain gender. But there's actually, it's a whole nother type of thing when it comes to sexuality. I really love the fact that you have an amazing, beautiful family. You have a wife and 2 children that you have been with for how long now? A very long time.
Yeah, we're coming up on our 18th wedding anniversary this year, but we've been together over 22 years.
Wow, that's incredible. Tell us a little bit about your family and how you met your wife and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I met my wife in my junior year of college. Now, she tells this story way better than I do because she's got a better memory, and apparently it stuck for her a lot better. But the way she tells it, she and her friend were working security for the college that she was attending, and it was a boring overnight shift. And they kind of dared one another to post brutally honest personals on Yahoo Personals. And, you know, this was well before internet dating was cool. It was still the thing you didn't ever tell anyone that you met through the internet. But she posted this ad. I responded, and she had just hundreds of responses. And she was trying to sort out, well, who are the serial killers and who consider connecting with. But she thought better of it and thought, no, none of these folks are worth it. But her friend told her that if you don't reach out to Bree, I will for you. And from there, we went on a first date. It became something serious very quickly. And 22 plus years later, here we are with 2 incredible kids. We're now coming up on 14 and 10 later this summer and doing amazing things.
That is incredible. And I admire anyone who is able to be a military wife, any type of service member's wife. Like, that is incredible, and it's an honor for everything that she does for this country as well. So we appreciate her and your family and your kids.
She has put up with so much, getting through multiple moves. I think we're on move number 10 right now. And just that uprooting and moving about and having to make new friends, new community everywhere we go. It's a huge challenge. And yeah, hats off to her.
Wow, that is incredible. Another thing we love about her is the fact that she has been able to endure everything once you came out. And was able to stand by your side and really help you through that process that you were going through. And I mean, you have lived through, honestly, in the armed forces, so much ups and downs and you know, with the different administrations and various things. You've lived through it all. And so I kind of want to start going into that. But first, I want to ask the question, you came out to your wife before you came out publicly. How was that talk?
So that talk, in a way, goes back almost to when we met. It was about 3 weeks after we started dating that I knew I had to tell her something was different about me. And it still was at that time where I didn't really have the words to express it in the right way. And in a way, I was sharing a bit of my confusion and my uncertainty. But I told her that I loved her. I told her that, I saw this going somewhere, but that I was different, that I like to wear women's clothes. I didn't know what that meant necessarily, but I knew it was a part of me that wasn't going away. And that if I didn't tell her and she was to find out later, I knew it would be far more damaging to our relationship. So to me, it was really important to disclose that up front. And then we had this opportunity over the years together to work through that. And boy, was it a roller coaster. It had some highs and lows. And because my transition certainly wasn't just about me, it was about her and about the family. And that me coming out all of a sudden changed the world's perception of her. Though she wasn't a different person, she was all of a sudden viewed very, very differently. Not, as you mentioned, both in terms of sexuality and in terms of relation to my gender identity. So amazing challenges, and for her to stick by me through all of that, again, a testament to her strength and the love that we share.
Yeah, that's an amazing story there. Whenever I know that you've always been rather open with your children. A lot of people are always concerned that, children are too young to understand and that sort of thing in rural areas. What was your children's reaction whenever you started having these kind of conversations?
Yeah, so we told my oldest when she was about 6, maybe going on 7. And it was amazing. It was truly in one ear, out the other. Can I go back to playing Minecraft now? It was just no big deal. And it's been that way throughout my time being out and having transitioned. And my youngest was only about 2 at that time. So it's kind of been a part of her life for her entire life. But when I went through transition, and it was great the way the kids supported one another and supported me. They actually almost became like British policemen to one another when they were trying to use pronouns and they would got it wrong. One would go, woo, 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 pronoun police, and they'd correct each other's use of pronouns. So it's been wonderful. They've been loving and incredibly supportive. Again, awkward moments, they happen, but it's just a great family dynamic that we have.
Yeah, I love that story. My youngest nephew, actually, we were in the bookstore, and there was a transgender individual in the bookstore, and he comes out, and he's like, that lady had a really deep voice, and so I had to explain, and I want to say he's 8 maybe, so he's pretty, relatively young. In a rural area, we don't get to experience a lot of that. And so I explained it to him, and he's like, oh, okay. And then that was it, So like, I'm a firm believer, like, as long as children are educated early on, like, that's what we need more and more of. It's really, they understand and they get it.
Just last night for us, I took my daughter to the mall to meet her friend, and she's walking in this group of her friend that has a big family. So there are 5 kids there, her friend's mom, and the family just didn't seem to be getting the concept that my daughter had 2 moms. So in the middle of the mall, in the middle of this group, she turns to me loudly and says, "Can I tell them that you're transgender?" And I'm like, "Sure, but you just did already." So, it's
right.
But for some reason, that concept was easier for them to understand than her having 2 moms. But it all worked out.
That's great. I do want to now get into your actual military service. Obviously, you joined up, I guess, right after the September 11th, and you served a great deal of time as a male. And I know that during that time, I believe you would have started, you've already dealt with some of these things. What was that process like, having to hide this piece of you during that time?
Yeah, so serving in the closet is a detriment to everyone, not just the people that have to serve like that. Because what the closet does is it really limits potential. Because anyone serving in the closet, and trans people know this, LGBTQ folks know this who served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, is that what we had to do was put a filter into our brains. And what that filter did was it sat in between our thoughts and either the words coming out of our mouths or the actions that we took. Because if we slipped up, if that filter broke at any one time, we could lose our career for something that had absolutely nothing to do with our ability to serve. And that filter slows you down because you have to pause and think. Is it okay to answer the question about where I was on the weekend, what I was doing, who I was with? So you're never really at your best. You can be good at your job, you can be great at your job, but you're never reaching your full potential. So when we remove those barriers and we allow people to serve openly, they reach for the stars. They can be their best self. And it's not good just for them, but when they're their best, their teams are their best, their units are their best, and they're accomplishing the mission better than they ever have before. So getting out of the closet, being able to serve authentically, what a gift it is to all of us.
All right. I think one thing I love that the book talks about is how many transgender people have served over time that weren't able to even come forward. I mean, we've had people since the Civil War days that we can actually discuss that were transgender. Do you care to elaborate on some of the transgender folks throughout time?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how many transgender people have served in the United States military. Data from the Department of Veterans Affairs shows that trans people have basically served at twice the rate of their cisgender counterparts. And there's a whole host of reasons for that. But we can look back at the historical record, as you mentioned, dating back to the Civil War, and examples of people like Albert Cashier, who fought in a host of battles in the Illinois National Guard, marching across the South, was a prisoner of war, escaped, got back to his unit, fought again, and then served the rest of it, or continued to live the rest of his life as a man, was buried with full military honors when he died, even by the people that knew he was trans. So there are these incredible stories out there. And the fact that they exist, though, to me, that's mind-blowing, because so many more of the stories are just hidden because the people that served couldn't be known that they were trans. So the historical record's going to be spotty, particularly the further back you go. But so many great examples of people serving in every major conflict this country has faced, and so many more doing so today and doing so openly. But we stand on the shoulders of giants who paved the path for us.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal. Now, a lot of people don't understand how that affected transgender people, which is it didn't really. Can you elaborate on that time period?
Yeah, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a law that was implemented in the early 90s, basically to try and soften the military's policy on lesbians, gays, and bisexuals serving. But what it amounted to was a closet by any other name, where people weren't supposed to tell that they were gay, and no one was supposed to ask if you were gay. But it didn't matter. People were being thrown out of the military by the hundreds, if not by the thousands, during that period for being gay. And this was a law passed by Congress because at the time, President Clinton started talking about allowing people to serve openly. So it was a backlash against open service. And it took nearly 20 years for that policy to be repealed by Congress, and the acts of heroism by so many people to come out and share their stories and just kind of normalize the experience of lesbians, gays, and bisexuals within the military. Thankfully, that law was repealed in 2011, and those folks could serve openly and, again, reached for their full potential. But it didn't apply to trans people. Trans people were still barred from service based on DoD's medical policy that basically classified what we now will call gender dysphoria as a disease that was incompatible with military service. So it wouldn't be for another 5 years which honestly was much faster than I expected it to take to get that first time where trans people could serve openly. In this country, trans rights have historically lagged about 10 to 20 years behind rights for lesbians and gays.
Yeah.
So for us to get there in 5 years was, again, this incredible accomplishment thanks to some really heroic people and allies. Very importantly, some allies who stood up from the LGBT community and said, this is the right thing to do. We need to make this happen.
Yeah. So on the day that they announced that transgender individuals could serve openly, I know that was the day that you sent out your email. What was your, and I know you go a lot into it in your book, but I want our listeners to kind of hear the story as well directly from you. What was your emotional mindset and before you pressed the send button?
So when the Secretary of Defense finished announcing his open service, I mentioned earlier, I sent a Facebook post out and I sent a message to my colleagues. But that's not the whole story. I was still nervous. This was a part of me that only a tiny number of people, less than I could count on one hand, knew about me up until that point. And so he finished speaking and I hesitated. But eventually I did get that courage to hit send, to hit post. But then I ran away. I went down into the bowels of the Pentagon. I found the gym buried underneath the building. I got on the elliptical machine, and I'd like to say I went nowhere faster than I'd ever gone anywhere before in my life. With all the nervous energy I had, I probably burned the motor out on the machine. Because I didn't know what the reaction was going to be. And when I eventually got back to my desk, I sat down. One by one, my colleagues walked over to me. They shook my hand and said, "It's an honor to serve with you." I was absolutely floored. It was just the most incredible experience of my life, and it was my honor to serve with them. And I will admit, I work in a nerdy career field. In the Air Force at the time, I was a relatively senior officer. I was a major then. I'm white. And I had this history of performance, and that mattered for people's perceptions of you. So my experience may not be the same as everyone, say a young 18, 19-year-old Latino in the infantry, in the Marines. But by and large, my experience actually was representative of trans folks in the military coming out to a positive reception of those around them. I would add, though, it wasn't all roses. My wife lost friends and family from my coming out. Her parents barely spoke with her for over a year. I really just checking in, how are the kids?
Wow.
And she had other friends who she thought were some of her best friends that to this day are gone. They simply couldn't accept that she chose to stay with me and to love me. So while I got a lot of adoration and love from friends and family, it wasn't unanimous across the board, and there's still a lot of hurt associated with that day.
Wow. It's a shame. It's such a loss on their part, for sure. Obviously, the trials and tribulations didn't end there, though. Obviously, even whenever people come up and shake your hands and they want you to serve alongside them, obviously we can have a change in the guard, and you can receive a random tweet one day that you shouldn't be employed anymore. So let's talk about one of the most traumatic areas of a lot of our lives, and talk about whenever Donald Trump decided that he was not going to live up to previous policy.
Yeah, that day was brutal, and I can remember that day on a summer morning in July of 2017. And I kind of set the context of that day as one where we had been in this fight with North Korea over whose button was bigger to launch nuclear weapons. And so it was kind of a period of high tension for the country of like, are we going to go to nuclear war over something silly on the Korean Peninsula? And that morning I was on my last day of leave. I was sitting in a cabin in northern Minnesota overlooking a lake with a couple of my high school friends. And it was just this beautiful, peaceful morning. Everything was calm. and my phone just started blowing up. And so what do you do in those days to figure out what's going on in the world? Well, you check Twitter. And the president had tweeted. And his first tweet said that the United States government can neither accept nor allow. And then there was a pause. And I was thinking, oh, what did North Korea do? Are we going to war right now? But then a few minutes later, he continued, and it was that, oh, no, we're not going to war. We're just banning transgender people from serving in the military because of the disruption that they cause and the massive burden that they place upon the military. And that was just a bolt out of the blue. So what do you do when that happens, especially as an active duty service member and the restrictions that we have on us based on, what can we say? We have to support and follow the orders of the commander-in-chief. And to try and figure out what the strategy was that day, to figure out, is a tweet an order? Am I going to have a job to go to tomorrow? So, and also being the leader of an organization that represents transgender people, we had to get a message out to all those folks about what can you do? And the message we had was simple. You know what you do? You lace up your boots, you go to work, and you get the job done until you are dragged kicking and screaming out of the military. Because what you are doing is setting a positive example. You are accomplishing the mission, and that is going to be what makes such a difference. It is sharing our stories and continuing to do the mission that the American people expect of us.
Yeah, that's the perfect message. I love that. It's always unique as an LGBTQ person because we remember certain days like September 11th for us, and for me, like some of those happier days are like, the gay marriage ruling and stuff like that. But I could tell you exactly where I was whenever that tweet happened, and I was in the middle of a bar exam. I'm an attorney, and I remember like we had a break, and we all came out, and like everybody, like we all looked at our phones and we saw this, and it was just like mass hysteria because obviously a lot of us are attorneys. We're like, how can he do this, and all this, and so. I remember that was a day that I was like traumatized by the tweet, and then I had to go take more of the bar exam. So like it was part 1 and part 2, and I was like, this is so. Every now and then we remember where we were, and that was one of those moments. So obviously this ban did not actually take effect for a very long time because they went through several different studies and different things. Can you kind of walk us through that time period in the service?
Yeah, so though that tweet came out in July of 2017, it wasn't until April of 2019 that a policy formally implementing a ban again on transgender service went into place. In the meantime, again, as you mentioned, the Department of Defense re-looked at it and kind of had this study where they said, is it okay? And they were going in the direction of like, yeah, it's okay. We're getting all these great examples from transgender service members, from their commanders, but that's not what the president wants. And so that didn't happen to make any sort of difference. Yet when the policy was first announced, a number of different organizations filed lawsuits against the policy. And injunctions were granted in court after court, putting the policy on hold, finding, clear issues with it and that it would cause harm. But when we got to January of 2019, the Supreme Court took up the issue and said that the administration could put the policy in place while the lower courts worked through all the issues of the case. So we got to that point in 2019 where a new ban was there, and no one new could come out. No one new that was trans could get into the military. There were about 1,600 of us allowed to continue serving because they said, you came out in a period where it was okay. We will allow you to continue serving, but you are an endangered species. The goal is to kind of just let you all leave the military. But even with that, there was a real insidious clause in the policy because it said that should the courts find that our example of honorable service was a reason to find the policy discriminatory, the clause that allowed us to continue serving would be immediately severed and we would all be kicked out of the military. So it was like serving with the executioner's axe right behind the military, where of course you wanted the courts to say, yes, this policy is unconstitutional, this policy is discriminatory. But then I'm out of the career that I cared so much about while that fight continues to occur. Thankfully, that didn't last very long. And when President Biden was elected, one of his first actions was to issue an executive order getting us back to a policy of open service.
Yeah, thank goodness. That's now, obviously, this is still a fear. Obviously, if we change administrations again, there's obviously a lot of advocacy that we need to do and have these solidified into law. I know that you are the president of SPARTA. Can you tell us a little bit about that organization and what you do there?
Yeah, happy to. SPARTA is a nonprofit that represents and advocates and educates on behalf of transgender service members. One of the most important things we do is provide a private network for transgender service members to connect with one another, to learn from one another, to take strength from one another, and to make it through the challenges of navigating this military policy, which is still pretty complex, and like any new policy, was rough around the edges. We now have the chance to make that better. But helping one another get through that is a really important feature of SPARTA to allow folks to connect. But importantly, we have that mission outside of the service members and to advocate for better policy, both with the Department of Defense and, as you mentioned, to advocate for law, to work with our elected representatives to say why it's so important to codify the opportunity for everyone to serve, regardless of sexuality, regardless of gender identity, or any other characteristic that has no bearing on someone's ability to serve. So that's one of our top priorities, is to make sure that we put something in law and we prevent it from being at the whim of a future administration to turn back the clock and again reinstitutionalize discrimination.
Right. Now, how many members are in SPARTA, and are they all more active members, or how does the organization actually run?
So we have about 1,550 members right now, the vast majority of whom are still serving. Because our requirement for membership is that when you join the organization, you are currently serving on active duty, in the reserve, in the National Guard, or you're also could be a member of one of the uniformed services like the Public Health Corps Service or NOAA. So people do then retire or eventually leave the service, but we don't throw them out at that point. So we want to keep those voices together, those perspectives together, and we want to make sure those folks are taken care of. But we get dozens of new members every couple of weeks. So it's pretty incredible that people are still coming out. They are still finding us. And sometimes we'll get emails or notes on Facebook from someone's parent saying, my child doesn't know how to figure this out and needs some help. Can you help them? And we make those connections. We also run a group for what we call future warriors, people that want to join the military and are trans, and we'll connect them with recruiters that happen to be trans and know the policy. And they can help guide those folks. Hey, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to understand. And we would love to get you in the service and serve alongside you one day.
That's great. One of the website, I believe, is spartapride.org. For those that are interested in going and researching more about this, I can tell you, I went on the website. You all have some amazing, just material. Amazing, and things that I've learned so much just by going there. So for any transgender person considering serving in the military, I think you all have everything answered on there. It's great. I do want to talk a little bit about that, though, for our transgender individuals listening that do want to join the armed forces. What kind of things should they prepare for?
Well, trans people to prepare for the military, in almost every aspect, it's very similar to anyone preparing for the military. Get in shape, be able to meet the physical demands of the service and basic training. Speak with a recruiter, ask those questions. But understand also, why do you want to go into the military? Because it is not for everyone. If it's not something that works for you, either it's a passion of yours, it's a family tradition, it's a means to get an education, to see the world, any and all of those are awesome reasons, and there are so many more. But you have to make sure that's something you really want to do. On top of that, for trans people, there are some medical requirements that the Department of Defense still has. The primary one is that you need to be, as they term it, stable in your transition and 18 months past any sort of gender-affirming surgery. So don't, say, I'm going to join right now, right after getting this procedure or that. Understand that there is a waiting period. That may change how long it is or what those criteria are in the future as we revise policy. But right now, understand that, you're better off waiting that time after, although feel free to work with a recruiter in the meantime, have a packet ready to go, but know some of that is going to be out there. But you can absolutely join the military as the gender that you are. There are no specific requirements on you must have had this or that procedure, but as long as you are stable as who you are and 18 months post any sort of gender-affirming care and meet all other standards, it's open to you.
All right. Now, I know the typical political debate is about cost. Can you address the cost of having transgender individuals employed by the military when it comes to medical coverage and those kind of things?
Yeah, so that one of the big arguments, as you mentioned, thrown against transgender service is that we're just far too expensive. But the Department of Defense has a compact with its service members that it will provide all necessary medical care to make you your best self on the battlefield, to get the mission done. And that's what gender-affirming care is as well. It's making us realize our potential, be our best selves, and be the most effective we can, either here at home station or deployed all around the world. And interestingly, when they studied this back in 2014-15, prior to open service, there was an estimate that transgender medical care might cost $3 million a year for the Department of Defense. Even that number is the tiniest fraction of a percent of the department's healthcare budget. Far less than it costs us to buy a tank or a jet or even to train a person. In many cases, that may be more than that total number. But in a fascinating thing, they actually studied after having a year of open service, well, what did it cost? And it turns out that transgender people could be said to be one of the few Pentagon projects that came in on time and under budget. It turned out that the care for a single year for the entire population of transgender folks was under $1 million, and much of that was mandated appointments where the department said, you have to do this, not this is necessary, or the person was requesting that kind of care.
Wow. Now, I understand that you serve in a sector that's not necessarily, front lines type of infantry, those kind of things. For transgender individuals that serve in those areas, do they have any additional concerns, such as, a lack of hormonal medicine, different things like that they may need to help them with their transgender or with their transition, that sort of thing?
So I don't think those concerns are really out there in terms of lack of access to care. I mean, in fact, I could deploy and do my job anywhere in the world with a year's worth of all the medication that I would need in the pocket of my pants. And anyone can do that type of thing. And we have some total badasses serving in the infantry and the armor that are pilots doing these things day in and day out all around the world. And what are they valued for? Their competency, their ability to contribute to the mission. And they are doing that. And their commanders go to bat for them because they see just how good this person is. And even more, they see how much better this person might be than they were before they were able to be their authentic self.
I want to discuss your time serving as in the U.S. Space Force. Obviously, that seems relatively new. People, they envision all kinds of things whenever they hear U.S. Space Force. Explain what that is and what you do as your job.
So the Space Force is the newest branch of the United States military, on equal footing with the Army or the Navy or the Marines. And what we do is design, build, and operate, our nation's defense assets in space. And what's amazing is that those satellites that we operate, they're not just things that no one has ever heard of. Space Force runs GPS. So if you ever put in directions on your phone and get from one place to another, that's Space Force providing the service that gets you there.
Wow.
Your credit card anywhere to get gas, to do anything, that is all backed up by GPS and the timing signal that GPS puts out. So if Space Force wasn't there operating it, you couldn't go to the gas station and fill up your tank. It's pretty incredible. But we also do other things like the communications that our military relies upon, or that the president uses whenever he's traveling to be able to communicate in a secure way with anyone, anywhere. We watch the entire world. We have a dedicated constellation of satellites up there that will see any missile launch on the planet instantly and report that so that our troops or anyone else who's under threat can take cover, and that we can attribute those attacks to our adversaries if they occur. And as we, as a species, move further out into space, that's likely the future role of Space Force. It's to defend our way of life, both here on the planet, alongside our brethren in the Joint Force, and as we move out beyond Earth orbit to the moon and beyond, Space Force is going to be the one to be there.
On behalf of all Americans, I could say thank you for GPS, because I would be lost without that. Now, how does that, obviously a lot of the space industry has become very privatized in a way, with Elon Musk and Amazon and the various people there. How does the U.S. work in relation to those privatized industries?
So one of the things, in my opinion, that we do pretty well as a country and as a military is we harness private industry. We take advantage of all these amazing developments that they're putting out there. SpaceX is a great example with the capability that they've delivered, the ability to reduce cost in order to get something into orbit. To return boosters and reuse them, they're incredible. And 15 years ago, we didn't know who they were. They weren't providing anything to the Department of Defense, but now we are launching satellites on SpaceX rockets all the time. We take advantage of the incredible ingenuity that this country has to offer, and that's what makes our military and our Department of Defense so strong, is the work that is done all across the private sector. And when we have a need, we look to industry and say, help us get there with some either solution that you have off the shelf, or help us design that next generation that's really going to keep giving us an edge.
Yeah. One thing I would love us to do is talk a little bit about this. This is With Honor and Integrity, Transgender Troops in Their Own Words. This is a book that Bree edited alongside, how do you say that name? Is it
Mel Emser Herbert?
Okay. So can you, obviously we've talked a lot about some of the stories that were in it, but can you tell us how this all came about and how you managed to get so many people to offer up their stories to the general public? I mean, this is some very touching, heartfelt stuff. So to be this open is incredible.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. And the book truly is a wonderful compilation. 26 different stories from people who've served dating back to Vietnam to now. And it's such an incredible way, not just to understand the history of transgender military service and how we got where we are, but to dive into those stories and realize that, there's no one way to be trans, and there's certainly no one way to be trans in the military. The breadth of those stories, from the funny to the sad to the poignant, is incredible.
Yeah.
And it all came about because of my co-editor, Mel, who is a professor of sociology at Hamline University in Minnesota, did a series of interviews. And I was one of the folks that they connected with. And they went to a film festival, saw what trans troops are going through and said, this would be a great idea to capture some of these stories. And we worked together through the network that SPARTA has and some other connections that both of us have, got this incredibly diverse section of collaborators from every military service across ranks and career fields, and just said, tell us your story. We didn't really put bounds on what that was. We didn't prompt anyone or say, we're going to, we need you to answer this question or tell us about this moment. And so you got this really diverse set of stories about people's just experiences and who they are, and they melded together beautifully.
Absolutely. I will tell you, and this is truth, I read your section and started crying whenever all the people started shaking your hand. Like, I was in tears, full on tears. So like, the amount that it can touch people is just truly heartfelt. And I think everybody should read this. If you're any part of the LGBTQ community, this is the kind of stuff we need to be reading to better understand each other. We do 3 different segments that we kind of intermingle throughout the show as we edit it later on. One of those segments is a do's and don'ts segment. We allow our guests to kind of pick anything that they want to give some do's and don'ts about to, rural LGBTQ kids and stuff coming up. So do you have some do's and don'ts for us?
I can give it a shot. Not a format I'm normally well-versed in, but I'm sure that I'll come up with some interesting recommendations. So my advice to just about anyone is, do harness the power of your authenticity. It makes a difference. Our authenticity enables us to connect with one another in ways that we just can't when we shield off portions of ourselves. It really does that thing for us all where we can be our best selves, connect with others, make a difference, and reach our full potential. So the caveat to that is, don't hide who you are if you can avoid it. Now, I know there are some people whose safety requires them to shield off a portion of themselves, and I would never advocate for someone to take a risk that is inappropriate, that would endanger themselves. But in so many cases where we don't know, I say, do give people the benefit of the doubt. When you're coming out, you may not expect a wonderful reaction, but you might get one. You really never know when you come out to someone, what that's going to be like. But in most cases, do take the risk. It is worth it in how we engage with one another and how we be our best selves.
What don't advice would you give to someone?
I don't normally like to take the negative because I'm
I know.
a positive person that always has that, the best thing we can do is share those positive stories. But don't leave yourself with regrets.
That.
So again, it immediately flips to the positive. Do go after those opportunities that are out there for you. Do find your people. Do find your chosen family. Do find the people that will stick with you through thick and thin, and do go after the things that make you happy. And one last one I will give it a do is the same thing they'll tell you anytime you get on an airplane. Do put your own oxygen mask on first. Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of one another. And if I'm gasping for air, I'm not going to be able to help you do what it is to reach your full potential. So do those things that recharge your batteries. For me, that's climbing a mountain or skiing down it. Those are the things that make me ready to take on the world and be with people. So find those things for you, do those things, take care of yourself so that you can take care of others and make the world better.
I will say not everybody has to climb a mountain to get that far, but another segment that we do, it's a segment in which we allow our guests to tell us a funny story about something that's happened to them because of their experience in the LGBTQ community. Obviously, a lot of your story is very heartfelt, very bold. It's got its happy moments with people that encouraged you and shook your hands. But I'm sure there's been some times whenever you had to either laugh at yourself because you said something, or you had an experience that just was kind of awkward at first, but you worked your way through it. Do you have any experience like that?
Oh, there are so many, and I shared a couple with you already. A lot of them are in relation to the kids, and they're dealing with me being trans in public spaces. But for trans people, often interaction with the medical community can be awkward. It can be painful, but in a lot of times it can be funny too. Where I had to go in for a number of procedures over the past year related to some medical challenges I've had. And, when they asked, can you give us a urine sample? And I'm like, well, I could in a while, but we just need to verify that you're not pregnant. I'm like, I'm not pregnant. And they're like, well, can you give us a urine sample? I'm like, I guarantee you I am physically incapable of being pregnant. Yeah, but we'd really like a urine sample to prove it. I'm trans. And they're like, oh.
Wow.
Okay. And so you have those moments where it's funny, but it's also that it's a little awkward.
I love that. That's the perfect, what we call a heap of trouble story in rural parts. So love it. All right. Well, another segment, our final segment that we always end with, it's what we call the pot of gold segment. It is a time for you to ask me any question you would like, and then I wrap up the show with one final question, the pot of gold question to you.
So I would love to know, out of the stories you read in the book, what stuck with you the most?
Honestly, the stories that stuck with me the most were the ones like around the Civil War era, because I just can't imagine during that time, back in 1860, someone being able to fully, almost hide and totally their identity at that time period. I know that there's like stories, and we see movies about, pirate ships and different people, ladies going on there that have, they have to present themselves a certain way. But many of the stories from the Civil War, what I noted the most was how, even after they found out, so even after, the coroner was like, this is a naturally born this gender, even back then, their service mates wanted them to still have the honors, still have the decorations of a war hero. And this was 1860s. And the fact that we still can't wrap our heads around it in 2022 is just mind-blowing to me. So, that was by far, and I'd never heard those stories, and I think that's why they stick with me so much, is the fact that we have come all this way and we're still having a lot of the same types of arguments, and it's been proven that this is, it's cost efficient, it's important for our troops, all of these great facts in support, and we're still arguing over it. So that by far, made the most impact to me. Obviously, a lot of the stories did, but the history, I guess, the length is what got me.
I think you hit the nail on the head in thinking about the fact that we've always been here.
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ people always will be here. And embracing all of us is the best thing we could possibly do for all of us writ large, everyone, for humanity, because we're not going away.
I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. And I think your question actually led perfectly into my pot of gold question for you. I kind of want to give a little bit of a background for our listeners. This was a time in my life that was truly touching for me, and I kind of built this around in this question. So obviously we're filming this in Pride Month. It's a month that so many LGBTQ veterans throughout history would have never been able to celebrate. One of the most touching experiences of my life was actually going and seeing the tombstone of Leonard Matlovich, who was the first gay service member to purposely say that he was gay to challenge the military ban on gays. His tombstone, for those that have never seen it, and I will post a picture of the tombstone. It's an immemorial for all veterans who are LGBTQ, but it actually states rather than having his name, it just says a gay Vietnam veteran. And it has the famous quote, when I was in the military, they gave me a medal for killing 2 men and a discharge for loving 1. That was incredibly touching for me to see. That was one of the first things that I can recall as I was coming out, being able to go and see that. And it's just the strong realization that your identity, who you are, what your sexuality is, can have such a life-changing effect that you can't even serve your country. So to wrap up this episode, I actually would love to hear what you would say if you had a chance to sit down and speak to Leonard Matlovich today and the other LGBTQ veterans from the past generations and kind of talk to them about where we're at now.
Oh, one of the amazing things that I've had the opportunity to do is speak with folks from his generation or thereabouts and get some of that perspective. And one of the things I want to do with him is just, first thing, what a huge hug. And probably a lot of tears. Because I recognize that I would not be here serving openly without examples like his and so many others who bravely put themselves out there at a time where they knew they would face discharge, as he did, purely based on their sexuality or their gender identity. Again, it didn't matter how good they were at serving their country, how accomplished they were. The courage it would take to stand up and say, this is wrong, is so incredible. And so I would just be this blubbering fountain of thank yous for what they did to enable all of us to serve and to have the opportunities that we have.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the service that you're giving our country. And that goes for you as well as all of our service members out there, especially our LGBTQ ones that are fighting not only for our country, but for their own rights to serve our country. That is a continuous battle and something we all need to take into consideration whenever we are at the polls, whenever we are making public policy and helping shape those things out there. So everybody, I want to say one more time, this is an incredible book. Go out and get it. It's with honor and integrity. It's transgender troops in their own words. These are real stories, 26 amazing stories, one of which is Lieutenant Colonel Bree Fram, which we are so thankful and honored that you've been here with us today. So thank you so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and all the thoughtful questions.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Don't forget to come on back now. I know we all love a little vibration, so if you are not already, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. And we will surprise you on occasion with a new release vibration in your pocket. But in the meantime, if you find yourself alone or crossing new horizons along the Rainbow Trail, and you need a friend or even a laugh to get you through those dark and stormy nights, holler on out to us. at www.weatheringrainbows.com, where you can find shelter in the blogs, videos, and other episodes that will hopefully keep you out of a whole heap of trouble. So until next time, y'all, giddy up, be true to yourself, and make the best of life. And wherever the wild tracks may lead you, may the rainbow always touch your shoulder.